We're going to get started in just a minute. If you take your seats, please. Great. Thank you all. It's been a wonderful morning so far. And I'm very, very pleased to introduce our second panel. I was on the first panel. I'd like to introduce my friend Meg Hammond. Thinking about RISE, my team asked ourselves, what is it about a place that inspires people to be innovative? How can we set up places where our makers, artists, creators, and inventors can make their magic? So we decided to invite some of the most creative and innovative people we could think of to talk about it. And we invited Meg Hammond to facilitate. Meg is a leader in community arts and arts education in the state. She's the executive director of Generator Makerspace, which is a studio, classroom, and business incubator in Burlington South End. If you want to experience a place that inspires innovation, I strongly recommend a visit to Generator. Meg, thank you.
Thank you. It's so exciting. Thank you. It's so exciting to see so many people here today at the UVM's RISE Summit, and I want to thank UVM, and in particular, I'd love to thank Tricia Coates and the Leahy Center for Rural Partnerships for bringing us together and for the work that they will do and are doing. We have an outstanding panel with us today with experiences and passion for entrepreneurship, technology, sustainability, and human-centric creative placemaking. We're excited to explore how place can inspire innovation. As Tricia said, my name is Meg Hammond, and I am the executive director of Generator, which is Burlington's community makerspace. We're a 12,000 square foot space that provides industrial tools and education to empower our community to make, collaborate, and innovate for our future. Before we start, I want to share a short story with you. In 2002, I had a traumatic brain injury that left me unable to work for about a year. By month 7, after living back home with my parents, mostly sleeping and living with a void of confidence to do simple tasks, depression had set in. I really needed to find purpose. I needed to awaken my senses again. So I traveled to Thailand and was part of a project building cob homes for communities that had been displaced by the construction of a hydroelectric dam. Janelle Kapoor, the founder of Clayworks International, led this project with intention. One morning, Janelle gave us a ball of clay, and she told us to find a spot and meditate for about 20 minutes. She gave us a prompt to think about our world 50 years in the future without a dependence on oil. So I sat there for a while with this ball of clay, and I imagined a world filled with people coming and going globally. The traffic patterns were tangled around this ball of clay. Everything was moving really fast. We were hovering above the ball, yet we were disconnected from the ball of clay, and maybe even suffocating it. After about 8 minutes or so, I started pulling the clay apart and building small infrastructures. I made paths and gardens, and I pulled some sticks and rocks into my little world and kept designing, and I was at peace. What was taking shape for me was a more informed, multicultural village of people reliant on one another. The pendulum had swung into a rebirth of localization. While prepping for this panel, this story had come to mind. I thought about my work at Generator and how we have localized rapid prototyping and fabrication. During the first month of the global pandemic, this localization became very real as we faced the global supply chain issue. The generator community stepped into action. We partnered with the doctors of UVM Medical Center to prototype protective equipment, and then we fabricated over 15,000 face shields for the state of Vermont to protect our frontline workers. By the summer, we were able to turn our operation that we called Making Hope into an educational program, giving youth a unique opportunity to see themselves as part of the solution. Since 2020, I've seen Generator as a true asset, not just for the local Burlington community, but for the state at large. A state I came to for the mountains. I came here because there are no billboards littering our natural landscape, which allow my ideas to flow freely. I stayed for so many reasons, but most of all because these are fertile lands for making dreams happen. So when I think about place and innovation, yes, I'd love to talk about Generator and why maker spaces are a critical asset, much like a library. But I'd also like to talk about our creative people, our small businesses, and how we can build the culture we'd like to live in. I'd like to talk about the power of partnerships and the corridors of resources that we need in rural Vermont regions that have deep connections to that ball of clay. I'd like to talk about how we need to consider these resource-rich corridors, much like our watersheds, ensuring that our whole rural state has access to be healthy and innovative. So, you guys want to talk about that? So panelists, let's answer the question, how can place inspire innovation? I'd like to have you guys introduce yourselves, and then we'll jump right to question one after that.
Hi, I'm Monique Priestley. That was great, by the way.
Thank you.
She was very nervous about it. It was awesome. Monique Priestley, I'm in the executive director of the Space on Main, located in Bradford, Vermont, right on the New Hampshire border on the east side of the state. I'm also a state representative, and I serve on the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee, as well as the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee and a national group that focuses on AI, cybersecurity, and data, which I will not talk about today. For the Space on Main, and the big reason I'm here on this panel of badass women is that in 2016, I had come back, I'd left for school and come back, and our Main Street was dying. It was super depressing. As soon as I got back from grad school, I was being recruited to all of the things because I was the young person who had tech savvy, and so I needed to, join the library board and the healthcare FQHC board and the chamber board and the business association board and the library board and the conservation commission, all the things, and do their social media and their conference calls and things like that. At one point, I was at a business association meeting, and people were just saying, how are we going to get young people here? How are we going to keep this town alive? How are we going to get Main Street back up and running? And I threw out the idea of having a shared co-working space, maker space, conference space, really just a place for we were using the library basement to run a maker space for kids in the basement, and we really just needed a hub. Our Five and Dime department store had been kind of that hub on Main Street since the 1950s, so I threw out that idea. Everybody kind of was like, what is that? And then threw out a community survey. And over just one night, I got 85 responses from people, and it was something like, if you had a shared community space, what would you do in it? What do you need in order to live here? How are you living here? How can you afford to stay here? Just kind of like, what are your hopes and dreams? And I met with all of those people face to face, and then and I guess this goes into the place, is like, it's about the people for me. And so that led to 300 conversations. And sometimes it was, I just need internet and I need to be able to work remotely. And other times it was, I really want, my parents used to run a live swing band and dance class every week in one of the like old church basements, and we don't have anything like that anymore. So it really became like all of everybody's stories as far as the shared kind of like what is a shared space, what is community, how do we thrive, really came from all of the stories of people who just wanted to like have a little piece of what their dreams were in the community. And so that's kind of the space on Main is now conference space, maker space, co-working space, but we focus on creative economy, small business and entrepreneurship, like business planning classes, STEM programs for youth and adults, and then civic engagement. I'll get into that later.
My name is Michelle Bailey. I am the Senior Program Manager and Accessibility Coordinator at the Vermont Arts Council, which is the state arts council. We're a little bit unique in that we are the only state arts council in the country that is not a part of state government, but we are our own 501c3. A nonprofit organization. We've received support from the National Endowment for the Arts and the state of Vermont and private donors and all, but we are just structured slightly differently. And our role is as primarily a service organization supporting communities and artists and schools in meeting their goals and trying to foster and encourage the arts and creativity in Vermont communities. And so my role has really focused on 3 different kinds of programs. One is our public art programs, where we have grants to communities through something we call animating infrastructure grants to help with public art and infrastructure and creative placemaking, which I'll just define in a moment. I administer the cultural facilities grant program on behalf of the state, and then I'm also the accessibility coordinator, meaning that I help to ensure that our grants and programs and services are accessible to people with various disabilities. So the Vermont Arts Council is also, just real briefly mention, the backbone organization for the Vermont Creative Network that Monique mentioned. And that is a broad collective of organizations, businesses, and individuals working around the state to advance Vermont's creative sector. So I personally am a 4th or 5th generation Vermonter. I grew up here. I live here now. I studied theater and dance at Johnson State College, now Vermont State University, Johnson campus. So I'm very deeply rooted to this place and the people here and my family. So I am really excited to have this job, and I've been at the Arts Council for 35 years now, but with lots of different roles, and I'm just particularly excited about the work that I'm currently doing in communities and helping them to make their spaces and places active and wonderful. So I'll stop there and pass it to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mieko Ozeki, and I wear many hats, but I am a solopreneur who owns a boutique marketing business called Radiance Studios. I'm also a co-founder of Vermont Womenpreneurs, which I co-founded 6 years ago. It's a support network for mostly women-led, women-owned businesses, small businesses, and also so a lot more solopreneurs. And I guess in my past, I came here to Vermont via New York and Boston. I'm originally from New York City, and came here as a sustainability coordinator for the Office of Sustainability here at UVM. And one of the things I thought about when I was thinking about what brought me to Vermont was I got to run a $250,000 a year grant program called the Clean Energy Fund, which was student funded. And some of the projects are here on campus, including at the Miller Research Barn. You'll see those solar panels, and that was one of the projects that we got to work on. I am also an advisor on the Leahy Institute for Rural Partnerships, and in addition with, as I said, many hats, A lot of my roles in boards have been in entrepreneurship and agriculture, so I also sit on NOFA Vermont, Farm to Plate, Intervale Community Farm, and also the Vermont Farmers Market Association, because I used to run the Burlington Farmers Market. So I think that's all of them, but there's probably more. And what I appreciate about, and I think I'll talk a little bit later about, what I appreciate about being being in Vermont, it is so different than growing up in Manhattan. So I love to share more stories about that, and that's it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'm Racheal Floreani, and beyond what it says there on the screen, I am not from Vermont. I am from a town of about 300, a farming community in rural Michigan. My best friend had the largest dairy farm in the area, and so that's sort of my background. I knew from a very young age that I wanted to teach. I didn't know at what level, figured out it was college. So I've been in school since I was 5. I'm an associate professor in mechanical engineering, biomedical engineering, food science, material science, and I'm now a fellow in the Gun Institute. I'm very grateful for that. So after about 12 years of working at the university, I wanted to really make something of what I was doing. There are a lot of brilliant people in my laboratory and in my classes. So I got the courage and the motivation from many people on campus and in the community to co-found a company. That company is Burlington Bio. We recently received a grant from the Leahy Institute, and part of the company and the main focus of that project is to valorize dairy waste, the waste that is the byproduct of the cheese-making industry, some of the ice cream-making industry here in Vermont. But we are trying to take that waste and we can turn it into a product, hopefully a food product. And the idea is that it will be a nutrient-rich product. In terms of the application of Vermont, I would say that what I'm trying to do is twofold. One, keep those brilliant young minds in Vermont. They come here and they graduate and they want to stay here, but they can't find the jobs that they are passionate about and the dreams that they want to pursue. So by starting this company, I have, I think, 4 or 5 interns working there that are brilliant. They are not interns, okay, but they are. But they're brilliant students, and the idea is, I want them to stay here. I want them to have a job. I want them to be paid a livable wage to buy a home and raise a family. That's kind of what I want to do. The other thing is I really, really want to support those rural communities. I know how hard they work. One of the best parts of my job is actually going out to the dairy farms and to the production facilities and the factories. I grew up wearing wellies. I grew up walking through stuff and seeing the cows and how big they are and being able to do that again. That's how I feel connected to Vermont. And so I'm really, really grateful to be here, and I really hope that I can improve every single one of the communities around.
Thank you all. Racheal, you might as well keep that mic because I'm going to start with you. Racheal, as she mentioned, she's an engineer, and innovation is at the core of her work, both as a professional and as an entrepreneur. What inspires you to innovate, and how do you create an inspirational environment for your students, and how do you help your students build confidence to experiment, which includes failure and iteration?
Oh boy, that was a long question. So innovation, my background is in art as well, so I minored in fine art, and I think using both sides of my brain really helps in innovation. I like to innovate because I want to help people. I try not to make trinkets. I really try and develop platform technologies that really can apply to many different scenarios. As far as the students or the employees, my team members, anyone around me, my idea of allowing them space, both time and place, because many people work well at many different times of the day. Many people work well in many different places. But if I can generate an environment of trust where people feel comfortable being humble, of transparency, then people can talk. And that's when real innovation happens. Not necessarily everyone contributing to the solution, but people talking about the problem. Because I really feel that for me, as an engineer, to innovate and to help out my community, I need to address the problem.
Okay, Mieko, you founded Vermont Womenpreneurs, and you lead these meetups around this state. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you focus on the art of facilitation, and how does facilitation work towards innovation?
Yeah, sure. So this year, I ran 33 different events across the state. That's both virtual and also we have our final bigger event, which is our annual summit, which had 250 womenpreneurs. And what I believe in is story. So one of the things that's authentic about, I think, what I love about Vermont is that story is a very prominent thing and people cherish it. Also, word of mouth is more effective than social media, especially in the entrepreneurial space. But when facilitating, I always think about how do I make it as simple as possible to extract story to the folks who want to either be a wallflower or who want to actually, also want to be upfront. And so when we do these meetups, it's a pretty simple premise. I'm like, everybody's in the room, and I kind of engineer it in three prompts. So the first one is, don't forget your name. Sometimes people do when you rush to introduce themselves. Don't forget what you do. That also happens when you're nervous and you're trying to speak in front of a group. And the last one is, because one of the things about networking is everyone's trying to extract some kind of pieces of information, is what is an update, an ask, or an aspiration for your business? And when we do that in a circle, what's wonderful about that is everyone's introduced themselves, so they're all on the same leveled playing field. And what's fun about that is then afterwards, people can have real sincere conversations. And so what I find is that in the room, one of the things is setting the room is kind of like, as long as you have coffee or alcohol, it always helps to get people's response. What helps is that people are able to get all of that information out, and then afterwards, go organically to that person and have a conversation. Start from the middle. Because if anything I've always heard from people about networking is it feels icky, because it feels very transactional. It doesn't feel like you can really get the things that you want out, because you're always kind of doing it in a very big, an elevator pitch or a snippet. So one of the things that I find in doing that is that women often tell me, particularly in performing a space for women, is they feel supported, and they also feel like they're heard. And some amazing collaborations over the last 7 years of running this have happened, where I've seen businesses where, particularly if you're a solopreneur, everything's locked in your head. Who's accountable for all of the faults? You. You have to have a way to vocalize it and be able to share the things, the trials and tribulations of what you're doing in business. And what I find is that people feel less alone, and they're able to basically build on their businesses with others and not feel like they have to solve it all. So I found that through facilitation, you just get some really interesting experiences that bring out new nuances to looking at a business.
Great. Anyone else have anything to add on that one?
I'll add. Yeah, I think actually something that, running small business planning classes, and then whether it's open events, something actually Rose said earlier struck me in that when she was talking about having a space to force people to talk to each other without actually telling them they're being forced to talk to each other. And something I've done is along the lines with Racheal with innovation is just trying stuff out all the time. So I've had events where I had pop-ups with Korean barbecue and things like that from a vendor. And that the first time we did a farmer's market with them as a vendor, they sold out. the first time we did like a bluegrass kind of like jam session where we had a bunch of we had 10 musicians who didn't know each other come, and like they were playing together. That was like our former music events had been really underattended, but something we did with the bluegrass group is we brought in the Korean barbecue family, and we did a dinner and bluegrass music, and the people that attended that were two completely different groups of people. And I was just like, go and sit at a table, try to sit with somebody you don't know, and it's gonna be weird, and just like do it. The energy that came from that mixing of different populations, from kind of two like events that were, one was super successful, one was like not, and then blending them into one like hyper successful event was really great. I also think like the business planning classes, holding space for people who are too afraid to like say something, are the ones that skip their names in an introduction. I've done things like text me if you like have a question and you're too scared to like say it in front of the whole group. Or whenever I have an event, I put paper, just kind of like layering, actually like what's on these tables here. So the people who are too afraid to actually say something have an outlet, and then I'll sometimes like call and say like, read what your neighbor wrote on the piece of paper for the whole crew. So just trying to just experiment with all of the different personalities and what people bring to a space that they're not even aware of. That really the blending is something beautiful.
Thanks. So yeah, that brings up performance for me in a way, because it's about having people bump into each other and have experiences and experience something together. And Michele, I want to jump to you because I'd like to talk about public art. And in particular, if you could tell us a bit about the role of public art is in placemaking.
Sure. I think I want to just take one step backwards and just share, as I was thinking about this question, thinking about what is place in this context, and isn't it, as opposed to space. Like, we're in a space. This is a physical location or a physical geography, but to me, a place is really where people want to live, work, play, visit. It includes all of those things that make a place a home, which is your architecture, the food, the music, the arts and cultural traditions, transportation, technology, and all the natural surroundings that we have in abundance here in Vermont. So those are all so key, but to me, what's also really inspiring about place is the social connections and relationships that make up those communities. And when we're talking about public art, you know, the definition is really, in my mind, I think about this traditional public art that you might think about murals, sculptures, memorials in the town green, but it's really much, much broader than that. It's any art that's in the public and for the public. So festivals, music, concerts, the actual architecture, landscape architecture, experiential art is all, when it happens in the public spaces, generally for free and accessible to everyone. That's what we kind of envision as the ideal kind of public art. And that is also connected to this thing called creative placemaking, which includes all of those other things. But for us, creative placemaking has some really key factors that I think Rose Friedman in her introduction hit on fantastically with all the work that the Civic Standard is doing in Hardwick around all these cross-sector partnerships, people from different private organizations, government organizations, nonprofits, individuals, artists, all of those folks coming together to make things happen, and that the arts and culture are kind of at the core of that work. And then also the community is engaged and participating in those activities in whatever way makes the most sense. So for those activities. So I think I'll stop there. I have other things, but I know we have other questions. So I'll stop there for now.
Does anybody want to add about your experience of public art and inspiring innovation?
I like public art. I'll say that. Yeah.
I'll just add that, if you're in a place where creativity is just exploding like that, how can you not be innovative? I think about innovation as things that are where you think about something in a new way, or you try something new, and the arts are just the arts and culture are ways to foster that innovative spirit and ways of living and thinking and doing your work. So I think they're all so integral to one another.
Yeah, I think, one of the things is public art sets a tone, right? It's like kind of interior design, but except it's expressed outwardly. And so as a kid, I'm going to talk about New York City a little bit. I grew up in the 80s and 90s in New York City, and public art was Keith Haring, and it was graffiti and everything else, and it set the tone for everything else that also happened creatively, like in terms of, everything from music, definitely music, hip hop, and everything else, and also just how we functioned in the city. That, like, even though it may look unacceptable, in a lot of ways, it informed culture and informs how society kind of interacts with one another.
I'm also going to add, from Generator's standpoint, that I don't think we would be what we are today if we didn't have the art, if we didn't have the A in STEAM, and we didn't bring this intersection of science, technology, entrepreneurism, and art. Because when people walk in, and I've done a ton of tours at Generator with a ton of different people, and there are a good handful of people that walk in and they're like, I am not creative. I'm really not creative, and they tell me this. And I say, that's okay, you're welcome here. And we walk through, and at the end, a bunch of those people that admittedly said they were not creative walked out and they said, I feel so creative, And so, yes, if you come in the Generator, it is like a public art piece. Anybody moving around and all the things that you would see, and the color, it's colorful. And I think that the relationship of the engineers that work at Generator and the artists is just beautiful. And there's so many partnerships and collaborations that have come out of there that are a more artist type with a more scientific type. And it brings the holistic left and right brain, as you were talking about earlier, together in a certain way. So it's, pushes the boundaries. Monique, talking about another space, you mentioned the space on Main in Bradford, and I would love to jump into civic engagement and how the power of partnerships and civic engagement has evolved your space and your programs.
Yeah, and I think actually this leads right off from the creative economy piece, and just so that having a space, having the people own the space, and that's why it was started, right, to try to get people to have a sense of ownership of the town and the region that they live in, so they will stay here, they will tell their family to move here, that kind of stuff. And nearly every single one of our kind of like main events that we have that we continue going started off with somebody asking if they could use the space for something. So our artisan markets and our farmers markets started off by a cheesemaker, a wine, like a vineyard, and a baker who were friends in the middle of the woods in Corinth. They didn't have storefronts, and they asked if they could host a Good Friday pop-up to sell their goods in front of my desk in the window. And that was super successful. People came in from all over to support these three women. And that actually also led into the kind of the business planning classes, is they needed support to like grow their businesses, and then they needed a more frequent way to like host and sell their goods. And so, and then the things like, as far as civic engagement goes, like I've had, pre-COVID, we had a lot of commission. I was mentioning the commissions and things. I was at one point on like 24 different boards. And in every case, everybody, and still this hasn't gone away, you're trying to fill those seats. You're trying to like say, how do we get new people here? How do we be more inclusive? Things like that. But we don't, I think, often in both government and just participation in anything, mentor people and support people and meet them where they're at. So I hosted a 9-week Citizens Academy, and it was just like a little group circle where people came, and I loosely facilitated with some guest speakers. So I asked people from each of the different towns around us. It might be something like 1 week was school boards, the next week was conservation commissions, and it was, why are you even on this thing? Like, who asked you to be on the thing? What are the skills you needed? What is it like to be a leader? Do you consider yourself to be a leader? Things like that. And those conversations people in that space started to realize that even across different towns, they had the same needs and the same projects and the same funding, and they couldn't coordinate with each other, and they had never actually met each other. So people from select boards in the next town over had never talked to each other before. And so not only were they kind of connecting, and then they were inspiring other people. So since COVID, we started doing something that was really just trying to get the community more engaged. We had probably 200 to 300 people that moved into town and more in the area since COVID. And they were all, as Tony was saying earlier, like came with like Google salaries and things like that. And they're hiding in their houses, and they don't know this random place they just ended up in that has nothing to do on a Friday night at 10 o'clock, that kind of stuff. And so I started doing potluck dinners, and I had those again loosely. I try to loosely facilitate things. So our first one was what is community and why does it matter? And then the second one was how do you participate in community? And then we actually have one on Friday if anybody wants to come, which is going to be legislative life. But in each of those cases, I had people from like Vermont, oh my God. Vermont Council of Rural Development, VCRD, sorry, Jess, and just the legislature and just select boards and things like that, just leaders who I've seen at these conferences, met at these conferences, been on boards with, to come and just like answer the questions that everybody's wondering, like, why should I care? Or how do I do this thing? Or I have a really big idea. I don't even know. Nobody's going to care. I don't know who to tell it to. All of those things that people are thinking internally and then don't know what to do. And those civic supper clubs, like, I actually did not expect them to be so successful. But we filled the room. In each case, it was like 35 to 40 people. And since our first one last summer, nearly everyone in those rooms has since joined commission, select board. They've started skate park projects. Like they, I think, and one of my goals is like, they don't need somebody like me to facilitate anymore. Like they are doing the thing. And I think that's the goal for me is to support them enough. If we have town meetings, there's 20 younger people who are now going to our select board meetings, and we have a text chain, and it'll be like, who's the like white-haired man who just walked in who seems like he's a little bit angry? And I'll be like, well, that's such and such, and then this is the whole backstory. Or like, who's that young person who just walked in? We've never seen them in our lives. Like, we need to engage them. Who are they? And I'd be like, well, this is such and such, and like, this is such a thing. And so, but like, now they know who that is, and we're inviting more people kind of in the circle to just have like a light support network. So because this stuff is scary, no matter what it is, trying to engage in a new town or town government or whatever it is. So yeah, I think.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome model. Do you share your surveys and your models with everybody who want to do this in their small towns?
I would say I have conversations. So a lot of people come to me or I go to them. I'm happy to drive anywhere in the state to sit down and talk to people about this stuff because I wouldn't have started the Space on Main or been asked to be on boards and things if people hadn't been willing to have those conversations with me. So I will share. I don't have like a written down model.
Right on. Okay, so we will have time, I think, in a little bit for questions. And okay, so my last question for you guys before audience questions is, how can a town or rural region increase their ability to rise above the challenges we're facing today, regardless of what they are? They might be the floods that has happened around the state, the tornadoes that maybe didn't hit, I don't think, but, or whatever challenges.
I'll start.
Yeah.
If you like. Sure. I would say that you should try experimenting with a little bit of creative placemaking. And often when communities come to me and talk with me about projects, I let them know, you don't have to start off big. It can be small, temporary, low cost, no cost, just having a community dinner with a little bit of arts activity or a, music, open mic, anything like that in a space. And so I think that if you want to start off, that's the best way to do it, because sometimes, I know you all find this hard to believe, but people are a little scared of change sometimes. And I think that when you try something as temporary, then it's not quite so frightening because, we're just going to try this. It's not a big, huge change to something I'm used to. And then you gradually build the momentum, build the excitement, demonstrate the value. People start building connections, and you can do another weekend or move it to a week-long event. And really thinking about, what are the challenges in my community that we're trying to address with this activity? It could be anything from the emergencies you mentioned, but maybe there's an unused space that needs revitalizing, or maybe it's healing after a tragedy, or it's, maybe it's just a planning process. Your community is undergoing a town plan, and you want to engage some of the folks and get those voices that don't normally come to the table on a Tuesday night meeting at the town hall or whatever, but, having those broad perspective of voices from different communities, different age groups, different races, different cultures, all of those things, people with disabilities, just finding ways to connect with them where they're at, as you were saying, and sometimes it may be through taking a photograph or doing a photo, doing an art something, or something that they're comfortable with, writing a 6-sentence or 6-word poem. I mean, there could be anything that you could brainstorm, and if you want to bring an artist into that, that's even better. You can, part of the programs that we fund are helping artists to be in communities to do this work and help to support them to be paid to do this work. So as you build and develop these projects, I think you'll start to see a much greater sense of community and folks who are wanting to participate in these things. And I will say that, innovation to me is about positive change, and change can only happen at the speed of trust, is a quote that I heard once, and I think it's so true that as you start building these relationships through these different activities and different places and spaces and people, you're going to start to build that trust in whatever it is that you're trying to address. So I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, so I would think of, kind of carrying on from your examples, I think of a couple, think about in terms of eyes, in terms of what is your intent, being willing to improvise, and also just being able to kind of, like, innovation comes from doing, actually part of that improvisation is, if you know about improvising, is yes and, right? So being open to the fact that things are going to shift and change and that there's new opportunities that open up. Also that you're doing iterations, right? If you're always sold on doing the same, like just staying in the same way, you're not innovating, right? So iteration is so key. And all, like what I'm hearing from, all of your stories is there's constant iteration of, if that didn't work, something else, try it out. For us, for Vermont Womenpreneurs, I have a visualization in my head of like, throwing spaghetti against the wall. If it sticks, awesome, I'll continue with that motion. But if not, then maybe I should move on to something else, right? And so I look to the constant feedback of folks going, I wish for this, and going, okay, let's give it a try. Where can we do it? And like seeing what doors open to be able to create those different iterations of things. And soon they become practice. I like to also say, take an instance, look at something like a farmer's market, right? So by definition, a farmer's market is two vendors. Agricultural vendors is a makes a farmer's market. And it always starts with those two vendors going, I don't want to have brick and mortar, but look, there's an open square. Let's start vending together. And they bring in more and more people. Eventually, what they do is also create a platform to encourage people to buy local, also encourage people to look at where their food is coming from. And all of this ingenuity comes into play. So if you look at a farmer's market, that's what you're seeing at play is it started with two vendors, and then they started to grow and more. And somebody who's willing to help coordinate it and make sure something happens for them.
I think of breaking down barriers between rural Vermont, well, we're talking about Vermont, right? Rural Vermont versus Burlington, let's say. Or families that are in, let's say, like farmers, and it is a part of their cultural identity, it's part of their family identity. Breaking down the barriers between them and universities or the innovative tech companies that are throughout the state. I think sometimes there's this hesitation. Now I'm like the voice of my father is coming out, right? Like he doesn't trust people in the big city. He doesn't. They don't understand his way of life. And I get that. I definitely get that. And I think that if we're going to work with the rural community, and this is me coming as an engineer and an innovator, a business owner, a professor, trust is a big deal. There needs to be trust. Once there's transparency, then we can open up. I think that everyone wants to succeed. My elementary school was bulldozed down. Like, I get it. We want to prosper, and we will prosper by talking to each other. And I also am trying to send people out throughout Vermont. That's my little thing. I'm not generating a maker space, but hopefully I'm generating a group of people who are jazzed about Vermont and want to stay here, who are absolutely brilliant and leaning against the wall over there. So I think breaking down those barriers is really important. The barriers don't have to be strong and scary. They can be little pebbles, but breaking those down.
I really want to build off the trust and barriers piece and just say yes more or pause when you say no. I feel like so much of what I've done when I've gone to people with an idea, the immediate thing is like, that's crazy, that's not going to work. Like, and oftentimes I will find a way to do it and I'll just do it. And I try to, like, even this morning, I had somebody text me from that Civic Supper Club who has, really has shown some reliability and ownership over some things. And texted was like, I really want to, do you think somebody in the town would let me use a storefront to do a market pop-up to take advantage of the EV chargers that we have in town now? And my first thing was like, no, the storefront owner isn't going to like that. No, this is like, no, this stuff. And I stopped myself and I'm like, you know what? Here's the number to the person who owns that big empty space. But before you go into that conversation, are you planning on managing this, or do you need a team to help you do it? Because he's going to want a plan from you. And I'm like, here, if you want to have that conversation and figure out what the pieces of those plan are. And she's like, great, I will figure that out because I don't actually have that yet. But I think that will turn into something. And so I just, for people in the room, one, don't be afraid to ask for help. I've asked for lots of help from random people. And I don't know that I've ever been turned down from at least having a conversation about something. But then also just if you are in the position to inspire somebody or be a barrier for them, pause and think about whether you actually need to be that barrier for them.
That's a great point. So Tricia, questions? Is there microphones or something? Okay, so if you have any questions for our panel, find a microphone out there somewhere.
Hello, ladies. Can you hear me? Yeah. First of all, I love this. Brilliant woman. I'm a sucker for that. My question to you, ladies, for females, particularly natural-born females, when we are on the path to inspire innovation, what do you guys think is our biggest struggle? Our fear of failing or our fear of not getting the economic support or community support to bring forth our business ideas, our art, and our service to our community?
I want to start on that one. I think it's just believing in yourself that, and then I don't mean that in like wishy-washy way, but like believing that you can be in a role of being an entrepreneur. So let me give an example. I run these meetups where women, they share around the circle, and I have people who email me beforehand. I don't know if I'm allowed here. Like, I'm not quite a business owner. I'm not registered. And I'm like, it's just coffee. Come. And what's interesting is I watch actually over the last 6 years, I've watched businesses evolve from somebody going, I'm thinking of this idea, and when they share it, people are like, actually I had one woman who's like, I'm thinking of starting a store where it's mostly crafts and everything else, but it's like using the stuff that people already like is in excess. And everybody clapped, and I said, well, this is the cheapest market research you can possibly get among 30 people. Like, this is an idea to go. And watching that person and their business as they come to the circle, share their story over, and they're evolving what their idea is, and then it comes to fruition, it's amazing. The best part I love is watching this transformation of somebody who said, I don't know if I qualify, to them when they say, I'm a business owner, and they're saying to 30 strangers in a room, and they look around and go, I can't believe that came out of my mouth. But to believe in that is really encouraging, and then to have the support. And what I said, like, one of the things in our circle that we encourage is big or small wins is encouraged to share, and we will be there to support you.
I'll go. I think having a familiar face or someone who looks like you is super critical. I would not be here if it wasn't for women who said, hey, come on, it's easy. They didn't say easy, right? But I think a lot of times I will think of it as a mountain. I'm like, oh my God, I don't got enough food. My boots are crap. Like, we're not, this is being dictated. Okay. But it's not. It's a day hike. It's not a 7-day trek. And that is something that actually took me a long time to get. But when I was growing up in all of my art classes, all of my art teachers said, kiss it, Racheal. Keep it simple, sweetheart. And that took me a really, really long time to understand. And being in school my entire life and getting to that point where I can say now that I'm a business owner was huge. It was huge. That was a huge shift for me. Yeah.
I'll just add quickly that a number of years ago, we did some artists in business training, weekend-long sessions, and most of the participants in those were women. And it took folks a little while to understand that, yes, I can call myself a business. I am a business. The creative economy really is about artists as business. So just because, it's a creative industry doesn't mean that it's not a valid and valuable voice in an industry. And then the last thing that I will share with you secretly that I tell myself every now and then if I'm in a meeting or somewhere where I'm a little bit nervous, I just say, okay, just 10 seconds of courage. Say what you need to say. Just have that 10 seconds of courage, and then you can do it. So anyway, that's my own little personal mantra there.
Yeah, it's similar to what you were saying earlier about start small. And your 10 seconds is the same thing, and then iterating upon that and building up your courage. If you're somebody that can bring people together, I just say just do it, and then ask for forgiveness for whatever was in your way and you had to move out of the way or something. I'm all about the grassroots and bringing people together. It does start small. I think Michael Metz is here, one of the founders of Generator, and it was a pop-up. So it became what it is after, we're going to be turning 10 this year. But it started as a pop-up. So I think the same goes for being a woman. I don't know if I could say I have confidence today. Maybe after I get off the stage, I don't know. But it just takes doing, making, starting, and pulling people together. Oh, yes, I can't see.
Hi, thank you. My name is Katie Wells. I am an ER physician, and I am the director of social medicine for the Larner College of Medicine. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to this panel. You're doing such incredible work in our community. And specifically really wanted to thank Mieko. You let me join one of the Vermont Womenpreneurs events early when I moved here. It was so inspirational to me as a physician and clinician with no business background to really sort of understand how to build a brand, how to think about all the integration of those pieces. And Meg, the generator at the height of COVID. So I was here at the height of COVID when we weren't sure how many masks we were going to be able to have, how long those face shields were going to last, early in the pandemic, and not really understanding how all of those pieces were going to move. And the Vermont generator was amazing. And so I just want to say thank you to the innovation here in that integration of rural innovation and healthcare. I know that's going to be a bit more of a focus tomorrow, but I just wanted to say thank you so much because these disasters, these emergencies are not going to stop as we see the impacts of climate change. And so thank you for all of the efforts that all of you are doing in our community.
Thank you. I think do we have time for one more question or one more question? Or maybe that's it. All right, find us at the next event or at the next thing. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Thanks for holding the
Thank you.
space.
Should I click the button? Do you want me to click the button to go to the next one? Click the button to go to the next one?
It's not... Was it up here earlier? Or?
Don't know.
It might be a little under...
Can they just press the button?
Yeah, of course.
Looks like this.
Yeah.